Environment Committee meeting to order for September 27th, 2022. Welcome. First thing on the agenda is the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with one slight modification, which is that we will be approving the meeting minutes from August 23rd?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. And that takes us to the minutes of August 23rd. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Move approval.
And a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, approved unanimously. Nothing on our consent agenda this afternoon. We have one item on our non-consent agenda, which is the 2022-204 wastewater treatment plant PLC renewal. Welcome, Ms. Heflin. You're going to talk to us about programmable logic controllers. Hopefully starting with a definition of what is a programmable logic controller.
We'll work on it, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Environment Committee members. And thank you for the opportunity to present this business item, 2022-204 Programmable Logic Controller Renewal, Design Implementation Services, and Construction Support Services, Contract 21P328. My name is Renee Heflin, and I am the manager of plant engineering, the plant engineering group for wastewater planning and capital project delivery. Other way, haven't operated one of these for a while.
Indeed.
Programmable logic controllers, are PLCs, are industrial computers that MCS uses to monitor the status of wastewater treatment process and control equipment which treats wastewater. 150 PLCs within our treatment plant system at 8 wastewater treatment plants are already discontinued by the manufacturer or will be discontinued by the end of this year. We would like to replace these PLCs over the next 5 years and tightly integrate the replacement schedule with capital projects in our program. The replacement of each PLC presents unique design and implementation challenges. Environmental services staff has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do this type of work and has done this type of work before, but we need additional resources to help us complete the work. The purpose of this contract is to provide additional services needed for the effort for this work. There are 3 main objectives to the scope of services for this contract. One is for assistance in design and replacement of PLCs. The second is to provide construction support services related to PLC renewal. And the third is for construction administration and inspection for environmental services capital projects. The request for proposals was issued January 14th, 2022. The solicitation has a Metropolitan Council disadvantaged business goal of 3%. 4 proposals were received on February 17th, 2022 from Automatic Systems Company, Brown and Caldwell, Carollo Engineers, and Stantec Consulting Services. Proposals were evaluated by 5 environmental services staff and 2 external stakeholders. Each of the proposals was evaluated based on the following: the quality of the proposals, the qualifications of the proposer, the experience of the proposer, and the service delivery plan. Carollo Engineers had the highest score of all of the proposers. The proposed action asked for today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize regional administrator to award and execute contract, that should be award and execute contract 21P 328 with Carollo Engineers for programmable logic controller renewal, design implementation services, and construction support services for a total not to exceed the value of $10,400,000.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Please.
Chair Lindstrom, I have a question. If we're taking out 150 PLCs, is there any recycle value to that? And if so, is the council capturing that, or is that part of the bid with the engineering group?
Great
Mr.
question.
Chair. Mr. Chair and Councilmember Zarin, there's not any salvage value with PLCs. They usually last about 14 years and are not really reprogrammable because the technology is changing so quickly.
These are essentially computers.
Well,
So
if I may,
Please go
Chair, essentially the reason why we need to update them is because the parts and software aren't being updated, right? We're not getting that. So therefore, we need new PLCs to be able to run the new programs. I would imagine that they aren't worth anything at all to anybody if they're not being supported. But I wanted to ask the question anyway.
Yeah. Sounds like that's the case.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, council members, there's not any salvage value, and parts won't be available at the end of the year. And even as we take the next 5 years to renew those, we'll keep the parts that are operating to back up what we have. So it's all programmed to get the fullest service life that we can, and to be able to replace those PLCs right before failure, if that makes sense. There's not a lot of value left. That's the goal of a renewal program.
Does Carollo take the old ones then, and then they are recycled, they're considered e-waste or something like that, and recycled?
Mr. Chair, the PLCs will be disposed of.
Okay. Very good. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure I understand. This is all services, right? It doesn't include the actual PLCs that are being replaced, right? This is just for services. And there's a separate contract for the actual devices.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Wolf, that's correct. This contract is not purchasing equipment. This contract is for professional services and construction administration and inspection services.
Okay.
So we may see that down the line at some point. The actual buying of the
Mr.
product.
Chair, yes, it will be under the project, but it will be a separate contract to purchase. If you'd like me to expand a little bit, and that is, rather than a big contract to purchase them all, there's delivery issues, and what Roger Rabine is the project manager. He's here is a plan to allotments so that we can meet delivery schedules, as I said, integrated with other construction projects. But also, as we move through 5 years, we need to stay on top of, being able to install the new PLCs as planned. So we would like to purchase those in sections so that we can make sure to meet delivery requirements.
Very good. Other questions or a motion?
Move approval.
Zarin seconds.
The motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to our 2 information items. First one is the 2023 through 2028 capital program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Today I'm here with Renee Heflin, manager of the wastewater treatment plant group, and also Adam Gordon, who's the manager of the Interceptor Engineering Group. We're all managers in the wastewater planning and capital project delivery. And we, the three of us, are primarily responsible for really pulling together the 6-year ES capital program. We're here today to go over what that program looks like. I'd also like to recognize another member on our team, Corey McCullough. He's a program administrator. He's really responsible for getting information from the 24 or so project managers that are in the department to get updates on projects. He's also responsible for keeping the three of us on task and on schedule to make sure that we get him the information that he needs in order to meet the deadlines for the council's creation of the overall capital program. So I'd just like to recognize him. A lot of responsibilities there. Today we're here, as I said, to provide a brief overview of the 2023 to 2028 ES capital program. This update will include some of the program inputs that are considered in the development of that program. And then we'll also be highlighting a couple of projects in both of our wastewater treatment plant area and our interceptor project areas. At the end of the presentation, I'll be giving a brief schedule that will include the ES capital program and the council's overall unified capital program, which will be adopted by the council, scheduled usually at the last meeting of the year in December. Next slide. Okay, thanks. The ES capital, the ES customer level of service is the lens through which operating strategies, maintenance programs, and capital program development are evaluated, and decisions are made as to what projects to include in the program and when to schedule their completion. I won't go through each one of these considerations. However, there are a few of the key considerations that apply to the program considerations that I would like to briefly touch on. Under the area of finance, asset preservation through system rehabilitation and renewal. These efforts maximizes the original regional investments that were made when the facilities were first built by deferring the need for their replacement. Also under finance, by prioritizing projects and their associated costs throughout the 6-year capital program, the goal is to maintain a uniform and planned level of expenses and keeping debt service as low as possible, thus supporting a continued AAA bond rating. Under health and safety and the environment, projects that address new regulatory permit requirements and critical condition asset projects are prioritized. And under customer service, projects are designed and constructed to coordinate with local improvements to mitigate impacts to communities and their neighborhoods. And also, we have projects reflecting service level needs as expressed in the council-approved local community comprehensive plans are scheduled to be completed by the time the service is requested by that community and at the level of service needed. Also, through the MCES annual budget workshops in the spring and the publication and release of the council and MCES capital programs, adoption, the program is communicated, thus adding transparency to the program. Next slide. To summarize, the capital program consists of two main parts. We have the authorized capital program, or the ACP. This includes a multi-year authorization for project spending in which funding sources have been identified. Most projects are fully authorized during the first 3 years of the 6-year program if the project is scheduled to start within the next 2 years. In some cases where we have a project that spans multiple years and it's scheduled for bid letting for construction, the authorization for the full project will be authorized in that first year in order to cover contracted obligations. The Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is where projects and their funding sources have been identified, but the council has yet to authorize that they proceed. These projects are typically scheduled to start in the latter 3 year of the 6-year program. And then there's the capital budget, which is the amount of the ACP that the council has approved to be spent in the upcoming year, or year one in this 6-year program. So the budget for 2023 in this case. Here we have a depiction of the actual and projected spending for the capital program. The light blue bars on this chart reflects the historic program spending between 2018 and 2021. The average approximately $100 million per year. The dark blue bars on this graph is the projected 6-year capital program between the years 2023 and 28. This reflects an average of around $290 million per year of estimated work. These figures reflect current project cost estimates based on priority needs, current inflation assumptions, the flexibility to respond to unforeseen timing changes, and project needs. The goal for administrating the program is to achieve an 80% delivery of completed projects each year in the program. This approach allows for program flexibility and eliminates the need for frequent requests for program amendments throughout the year. The increase in the projected needs in the capital program is a result of two basic drivers. The first being that there are major projects that are included in the 6-year plan in the wastewater treatment area, and Renee will cover some of those projects a little later on. The second driver is that many projects were deferred during the period in which the ES capital debt service was high. This is commonly referred to the debt bubble period. The debt bubble ended in 2022, and many projects that were delayed are now necessary to address capacity needs for communities, address regulatory requirements, and to continue asset preservation needs. And the gray bar in the center of this chart represents the 2022 program expenditures, which are projected to come in at about 75% of the originally estimated $160 million figure. This equates to about $115 million that we expect to come in at by year's end for this year. Here's a breakdown of the proposed 2023 authorized capital program. The current authorized program has a value of approximately $1.104 billion. We have existing projects that are currently in the authorized program that reflects an increase of $223,300,000 approximately. These adjustments includes better defined project scope and costs. We have new projects being added to the authorized program, proposed projects, in the order of $55 million. These new projects are either brand new to the program that have been recently identified, or they were pre-existing projects in the CIP which are now moving ahead into the ACP, and we're seeking authorization under the proposal. And then lastly, we have a number of projects that have been completed and which will be closed. That reflects a reduction or an offset of what we're requesting authorization for of approximately $120 million. This gives us a total proposed authorization of $1.263 billion for 2023. This is the 6-year authorization request. Also included in your packet was a handout that better defines and delineates the changes on the program basis. So if you have any questions regarding that, you can certainly ask one of the three of us for any of that, but more detailed information in the packet. Consistent with the Council's objective categories in its unified capital program, the ES capital program is broken down into 3 objectives: asset preservation that reflects renewal or rehabilitation projects for wastewater treatment conveyance systems, system expansion, which reflects growth projects that satisfies the need to increase capacity for existing systems and communities, or extending new service to other communities that are not currently served. And we have system improvements, which includes regulatory-driven projects, treatment process improvements, system reliability, wastewater reuse, energy conservation, and safety-related projects. The percentages of these objectives fluctuate slightly from year to year, but from one year to the next, but due to the shift over periods of time to reflect project needs to address growth versus asset preservations, they do fluctuate from time to time. For the proposed authorized program, we have projects that equates to about 60% reflecting asset preservation or renewal, and an evenly split 20% between projects related to system expansion and system improvements. The ES capital program is also broken down into two types, interceptors and wastewater treatment plants. Interceptors under the proposed program reflects about 40% of the total proposed ACP, and treatment plants reflects about 60%. These project percentages also shift over time. The proposed capital program, again, includes a number of significant wastewater treatment plant projects, which plays a part in the 60% being the majority of the type of project in the program. And again, Renee will cover some of these projects. This is a graphic summarization of the proposed 6-year total capital program. So this is both the authorized or ACP and also the capital program, that portion of the program that we are not seeking authorization at this time, but does reflect future requests. The ACP proposed is $1.263 billion. The future request, or the CIP, reflects a future request of $778 million for a total program of $2.041 billion. The capital program budget for 2023 is being requested at $243 million. The ES capital program is funded through 3 primary funding sources. We have the Public Facilities Authority loans, or PFA loans. Typically, the council ES asks for $50 million annually in loans through this funding source. These loans are offered at a very low interest rate. This year, last week, there was a PFA board meeting in which the board shared some of its 2023 fiscal year awards under the project priority list. Loans up to $64 million offer the lowest interest rate available. Again, the council is planned to request $50 million. The 2023 interest rate is 1.75, which is 75 points above the current rate of 1%. So extremely attractive interest rates through this program. Another funding source is the council general obligation, or GO bonds. The needs to fund the capital program varies from one year to the next. It's based on the fund balance of that program and then the projected funding needs. Usually, we ask for bond issuance for the ES program approximately 18 months or so. Typically, the request is for anywhere from $50 to $80 million per issuance. These, again, are very good interest rates, in part due to the council's current AAA bond rating. It's anticipated that ES will request a bond issuance in 2023 to support the capital program needs as outlined here this afternoon. The current bond rate that was acquired in
Question, yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if the rates are so good on the PFA loans and you can get up to 64 million, why aren't we asking for 64? To have more strings with it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf. Yeah, traditionally we've asked for the 50 million. It's somewhat of an agreement to set that ask at 50 million, recognizing that there are a lot of outstate needs as well. And so it's the council's way of kind of establishing a known set of, or known amount of the ask. That 64 million also fluctuates from year to year. We were made aware of the elevated increase at the board meeting yesterday, and we submitted for our project funding back in March, I believe. Back in March, so the $64 million limit wasn't known to us at the time that we requested the funding. There's also, at the board meeting, there was a discussion surrounded or around the fact that there wasn't a bonding bill this session. So the projects that were that were certified, the PFA will commit to the level of funding for those projects that were certified and approved under the 22 program. But for projects that have not been certified, they're going to hold off on allowing those projects to be certified until there's a next bonding bill, likely not until next session next year. So even if there was a greater level of availability, we wouldn't have been able to draw on that until 2023 anyways, just because of the issues surrounding the lack of a bonding bill this year. But typically, the $50 million is what we've asked for in the past.
Follow-up.
Thanks, I understand that, but our capital expenditures are going up dramatically too, so I'm wondering why we don't think about increasing the amount that we do in PFA.
Yeah, there's also another consideration too. There is a certain amount of capacity that we have to actually deliver projects. We've historically have been able to just match that $50 million loan amount through previous years in the capital program. But it is a point worth taking, or worth noting, that in the future, it's cheaper money, and we could certainly revisit and have discussions with the PFA and PCA regarding a desire on our part to ask for more money.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Good questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. And then the third funding source is PayGo. These are set-aside funds from the municipal wastewater charges that are dedicated to paying for some of the capital expenditures. This strategy reduces debt service that would otherwise be incurred if projects were funded through the GO bond funds. The proposed 2023 PayGo fund is $11 million, which is the same rate as it's been in the last few years. One way the capital projects get into the capital program is through comprehensive plan submittals, whereby regional service level needs are reflected, and once approved by the council, the necessary improvements to provide that level of service is programmed in the capital program. And then through Minnesota Statute 473, that allows us to do a check against the local levels of service and the ability for the council to provide that level of service through the system. The council, again, exercises the authority to review comprehensive plans to determine conformity with the metropolitan system plans. For the wastewater system, this review is to confirm that the level, method, and timing of the service at the local level is consistent with the regional wastewater system plan. If the plan is found to be consistent with the regional wastewater system plan, then the local wastewater plan is approved by the council and the local community is authorized to implement their plan. If the local plan is not in conformance to the regional wastewater system plan, then the council can require the local community to modify its plan. So there's that check that verifies that the system has capacity to accommodate the service level needs. And of course, once the local wastewater plan is approved and the community is authorized to implement it, the council will review the request for local extensions or alterations through the state's permitting process to confirm consistency with the approved and locally adopted plan. Just to wrap up the project inputs that come from comprehensive planning, here's just a couple of examples of projects in the ES Capital Program that were identified through the review and approval of the local comprehensive plans. We have the Blaine Relief Interceptor. This is a project that is basically a parallel interceptor with an existing interceptor that serves Blaine. The existing interceptor serves both Blaine and Lino Lakes, but the second interceptor is necessary to provide service for the western part of Lino Lakes that has included growth projections in their comprehensive plan. We have the Savage trunk sewer acquisition for Credit River. The city of Credit River came in with a request for regional service, so the process the council will initiate has included a project and activities to include acquisition activities for that facility in the city of Savage.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
thank you. What is the timing on that Savage interceptor?
We are initiating the planning activities currently. The Savage interceptor is in place. It's a local trunk sewer. And so there will be a set of, we've already been in contact with Savage. There will be a need to do a system capacity check, hydraulic, to confirm that there's adequate capacity for both long-term Credit River and the city of Savage. Also a condition assessment to make sure that the pipe is in good working, operating condition. If it's not, then there will be improvements programmed to make those improvements, whether they're condition or capacity related. And the city of Credit River has indicated that they do plan on building local infrastructure and connecting existing failing septic systems that are within the community by 2024, I believe. The immediate terms of the service will be covered under an inter-community agreement with the city of Savage. They've already been in negotiations with that, and Savage is on board with providing that service through the agreement up until 2030.
Okay, thank you.
And I will ask about the parallel line in Blaine. What's the status of that one, or the timing?
Yep, Mr. Chair, we are just in the initial phases of planning. Again, the city of Lino Lakes had programmed growth and service level needs by 2030 as well.
Great. You've been in touch with the city of Blaine officials, or is not quite yet?
We've been in contact with the city officials of Lino Lakes.
Okay, but so it goes from Lino Lakes through Blaine?
Yeah, technically, it'll go through Circle Pines, another third player in this, but it'll go through Circle Pines down, generally speaking, Lexington, and then connect to an existing interceptor that's on with the border between Circle Pines and Shoreview. This is actually a project that 90% of the design was completed back before 2008, when the city of Lino Lakes had programmed growth in this area of the city. But with the downturn with the market, the development dried up, and then they revised their plan to basically take that growth off of the forecast. So we basically paused the project. We do have a set of plans that are 90% complete, but there'll be a need to do, an updating of surface conditions and design, and
Great, thank you.
interesting story. And then we also have the Rogers wastewater treatment plant acquisition that came in through the comp plan that was acquired in 2019. Crow River wastewater treatment plant that will be built, that will phase out the existing Rogers plant. And then also we have a number of small system improvements such as meter stations, lift stations, and other small improvements that helps facilitate local planning needs. With that, I'll now turn it over to Renee who will review some of the wastewater plant projects.
Thank you, Kyle. So there are 6 major wastewater treatment plant capital projects that I want to highlight this afternoon. And these are 2 design-build projects at the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant. The one I've already mentioned, a system-wide PLC, or Programmable Logic Controller Renewal program at all wastewater treatment plants. Improvements for the Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant, and then there are 2 new plants, Hastings and Crow River. These are the largest, most complex plant projects that are planned to be under construction in the next 6 years. We received proposals for the Metro Services Building and Site Improvements Project on August 11th. This is a design-build project that will relocate about 60 environmental services staff who currently office in temporary trailers or lease space. And we will relocate those staff to either the new services new services building or the field services building annexed to the Metro Plant Laboratory Services Building. About 18,000 square feet of the analytical laboratory will be rehabilitated or remodeled. The new services building addition on the west side of the analytical laboratory will be 27,000 square feet and industrial waste and water resources staff. The field services addition on the east side will be 19,000 square feet and will provide office areas for laboratory staff, additional sample intake areas, and also field vehicle parking. The design-build contract will be awarded this year, and construction will be completed 2024, when the current lease is up at Metro 94. The Metro Plant Fourth Incinerator Project is another design-build project at the Metro Plant. This project will help us preserve assets and meet capacity needs. The service area is expected to grow by 500,000 people by 2050. The fourth incinerator train, which will include energy recovery and air pollution control equipment, will be housed in a relatively small addition to the solids management building. The project will also install a new, larger steam turbine generator on the west side of the solids management building, and this steam turbine generator converts steam derived from the heat of combustion to electricity for the plant. The design-build contract will be awarded in 2023, and construction will be complete in 2026. I also wanted to point out that the fourth incinerator project, which is the largest one we have in the capital program, will probably spend around $50 million a year. It did not qualify for PFA funding. We turned in a facility plan, and it did not qualify. And this is the one I talked about earlier. The programmable logic, or PLC renewal, is a new program for the plants. The PLC parts will not be available after this year. So the program will replace 150 PLCs at all of the wastewater treatment plants except Rogers. So PLCs at the Rogers wastewater treatment facility have previously been upgraded through a previous improvements project at Rogers. Last time we did this, plant PLCs were replaced over a 10-year period, 2003 through 2013. We anticipate having to replace PLCs every 14 years or so, 12 to 14 years, and so we are due for another renewal. This time around, we plan to complete the work, as I mentioned earlier, in 5 years in coordination with other planned wastewater treatment plant construction projects. So the approved facility plan for the Blue Lake wastewater treatment plant contains 3 phases of capital improvements. The Blue Lake wastewater treatment plant improvements phase 1 includes work that needs to be completed in the next 10 years to maintain our level of service. And there will be at least 3 construction projects: renewal of solids treatment facilities, which includes a new dryer, as well as rehabilitation of the existing dryer, addition of a 5th digester, and liquid process improvements that will help the plant treat projected peak hour flows, as well as it's going to help the plant prepare for meeting future phosphorus limits. And we anticipate those in the next permit cycle at Blue Lake. Construction will start on the first project in 2024, and construction on the third project will be completed in 2027. The new Hastings wastewater treatment plant will be located about 2.5 miles southeast of the existing plant, which is located downtown to 2445 Ravenna Trail in Hastings. The new plant is needed to meet long-term capacity needs and to meet anticipated future permit requirements for nitrogen. So if we compare, the existing plant has a design capacity of 2.3 million gallons per day and is located on 3.65 acres with no ability to expand. The new plant will have a treatment capacity of 3 million gallons per day and will be expandable to 10 million gallons per day. The proposed site plan consolidates new facilities on 10 acres, so you can compare 10 acres for the new one to 3.65 acres on the existing one. The site is 221 acres, and the proposed site plan is an efficient use of the site, 10 acres on 221. The new plant will be constructed using design, build, delivery 2024 through 2027. Very similar to Hastings, the new Crow River wastewater treatment plant is needed to meet long-term capacity needs and to meet anticipated future permit requirements. The new plant must be operational by December 31st, 2030, per our intergovernmental agreement with the City of Rogers. The new plant will have a treatment capacity of 3 million gallons per day and be expandable to 16 million gallons per day. And the Crow River plant will free up capacity for urban core growth in the interceptor system. The new plant will be constructed using design, build, delivery, again, 2026 through 2028. Now I can turn it over to Adam, who will talk about the interceptor projects.
Thank you, Renee. Chair and council members, my name's Adam Gordon. I'm the engineering manager for the Interceptor Engineering Group. Approximately 120 active interceptor projects are in the capital program. Today, I am presenting 5 projects, all of which are to rehabilitate facilities. These projects are near completion and design and will likely be advertised this winter. This project is the Excelsior Area Lift Station L20 and is one of 5 projects included in the Minnetonka Area Facility Plan. This project calls for the abandonment of L20, which was constructed over 50 years ago, and a new gravity interceptor pipe to divert flow from Lift Station L20 to MCS Lift Station L19 in Excelsior. The project includes upgrades to L19 and will include street and utility improvements that are coordinated with the City of Excelsior. The Coon Rapids 4NS 525 rehabilitation project includes cured in place pipe or CIPP lining of approximately 7,900 feet, a 48-inch gravity interceptor sewer, and 20 maintenance holes. It is the first of 2 phases to rehabilitate very corroded pipe. The project also includes coordination with the City of Coon Rapids to maintain access to Erlinson and Alphen parks during construction. The L48 rehabilitation and 6DH645 force main replacement project is another project included in the Lake Minnetonka Area Facility Plan. L48 was originally constructed in 1971, included buried valves between the wet well and the pumping equipment. One of the valves has failed, causing significant reliability issues. The ductile iron pipe, or DIP force main, is over 50 years old, and the gravity sewer outfall has structural deficiencies. The project will include a new valve vault to get those the valves out of the ground. Rehabilitated new force main, actually a new replacement force main, and a replacement section of new gravity sewer where the structural deficiencies are located. The L46 and 49 lift station improvements project is the third project presented here that is also included in the Lake Minnetonka facility plan. The L49 lift station and force main, built in 1960s in Orono, no longer has sufficient capacity and requires significant upgrades. The project includes the replacement of L49 and capacity upgrades to L46. A condition assessment of the force main that's located between the two lift stations was performed during design, and that force main was found to be in good condition. The 1MN310 rehabilitation project between 23rd and 33rd Avenue North is north of downtown Minneapolis. Includes rehabilitation of nearly 4,900 feet of poor condition interceptor sewer and the rehabilitation of 13 brick maintenance holes. This 54-inch concrete gravity pipe sewer interceptor was constructed in 1935. The project is one of a series of projects to rehabilitate the 1MN310 interceptor. The previous phase, you might have remembered, included lining of the interceptor between 8th and 15th Avenues along 2nd Street North, completed in 2021. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kyle.
Yep, thank you, Adam. Just in conclusion here, we have the schedule for the approval of the ES capital program. I believe last month you were presented the division level budget proposals and acted on the preliminary unified operating budgets and council levy proposals. Next month you'll be presented the division levy capital programs and the unified capital programs. And also next month, public review comments on the draft budgets will be presented and adopted. And then the final adoption of the 2023, I think there's a typo there. The final adoption of the 2023 program will take place, as I mentioned earlier, in the last official of the council in December this year. That, and questions?
Other questions? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one's kind of deep in the weeds for Adam, I'm sorry. But you talked about 1MN310 in there, but the list of projects has a pretty substantial one for 1MN320. Seems like we've been working on that the whole time I've been in the council, but is that another major one, or is that a typo?
Actually, council member most of my career. That we presented last year, and so I wanted to give you a flavor of what we were doing, what was coming up this year. The status of the 1MN320 project is we're very close to securing some property, which is necessary to keep the project going forward. And we're still planning on presenting a facility plan this fall for those facilities, which will include a pump station and new gravity interceptor pipe.
Thank you.
Other questions? Please.
Mr. Chair, so at transportation yesterday, we, because of COVID, right, there's been some cost savings as it relates to increased lifetime of buses, right? And so just to kind of applying that same sort of lens to our budget, my assumption is you don't have that any kind of COVID impact on environmental services.
People are still
Capital,
flushing.
right, yeah.
You're looking at me, Mr. Chair, council member. We really haven't seen a reduction of our facilities anywhere. It's interesting because I was just talking to a system modeler who's been working in Duluth, and they actually have some trunk sewers that the flows went way up, and they're concerned about capacity because there's more population that is working from home. I don't think we've seen anything really significant due to the changes in work and work relationships in the Twin Cities.
Thank you.
Good question. Yes, go ahead.
So with the much larger per year capital projects that we're looking at, what's that going to do long-term to our rates?
We did, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf, we did talk to finance, our financial person, Dan Schuler, who did take a look at what the potential impacts would be at those higher levels, assuming that we achieve that 80% goal of trying to hit those annual expenditures. And I think they were pretty much in line with what we are anticipating, about a 5%, 5.5% increase to facilitate that, which is pretty close, I think, to what we're proposing for next year. So a little bit of an impact, but not as much as one would have anticipated, I guess, based on the fact.
I'm looking farther out than just next year. That's a substantial increase.
Yeah, it did represent a 5% annual increase in the 6 years of the program.
5 years each year.
A 5-year, yeah, it was a 5-year, I believe it was a 5-year.
Or 5% each year.
5%, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Private Property Inflow Infiltration Grant Task Force.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
A familiar face.
I'm back, yes. Today I'll be giving a brief overview of the council's plan to develop a private property I&I grant program. Here with me is Ned to answer any specific questions you might have in regards to funding of the program. I know that last legislative session, staff was up testifying at a number of committees in both the House and the Senate, and that was one of the reoccurring questions that came up is how, what plans do we have in funding this program? So we can address those questions. First, I'd like just to give a very high-level timeline related to the events and efforts by the council as it pertains to its historic activities in I&I. Really, the key point of this timeline, which is continued on the next slide, is to show that I&I efforts really started back in the 1980s when the EPA provided funding for local communities to conduct I&I studies. Many of those I&I studies were actually included in the community's 1998 comprehensive plan. So I&I has been an issue that has been studied here in the Twin City area for a number of decades. And of course, the regional I&I efforts really started or kicked off from a system failure that occurred in response to the significant rain event in 1998, commonly referred to as the superstorm or megastorm. System response, excess I&I in that system, caused a portion of the interceptor system to fail immediately north of the Blue Lake Treatment Plant on the Eden Prairie side of the Minnesota River. That failure resulted in a spill into the Minnesota River for 10 days, I think just less than a couple of weeks. That led to negotiations and discussions with the Environmental Protection Agency, whereby at the end of those discussions, the council committed to performing a system evaluation to assess the impact that excess I&I has on the regional wastewater system. So the result of that commitment was a report that was issued in 1990. It led to recommendations for an incentive, disincentive program. Was one approach. Was the recommendations. The incentive program would be for the agency to offer grants to incentivize local communities to do I&I projects. And then also identified a disincentive program, which basically was fees and charges. So community that discharges excess peak flow into the system would pay a surcharge. Then in response to that 1990 report, between 92 and 2000, the council's predecessor, the Metropolitan Waste Control Commission, offered I&I grants to communities to investigate and eliminate I&I from the local collection system, and these were for public infrastructure studies and improvements. Then after the last 2000 grant in 2002, the council conducted another system study to evaluate the effectiveness of the local efforts and redetermine the impact that excess I&I has on the regional wastewater system. The study found that the system was still significantly impacted by I&I and that it was more cost-effective to address excess I&I through source reduction versus adding system capacity for peak flow conveyance or peak flow storage. So in 2004, the council convened the first of 3 I&I task forces that would guide the council in developing and implementing a regional I&I program. Between 2007 and presently, local communities that were identified as exceeding their peak hourly discharge limit was assigned an I&I work plan. These were expressed in dollars. The communities were given between 4 and 5 years to complete those plans, while during which their discharges into the system were continued to be monitored and measured, and the peak flow exceedances notified. Communities were notified of those, and communities needed to continue to do work. Then in 2009, another task force was formed to review the need for a continued program and efforts to mitigate sources of I&I. The 2009 task force recommended that the council continue its program, that there was value in mitigating I&I at the source, and also recognized that communities were still exceeding their peak discharge rates. Then in 2016, the last I&I task force was formed to identify the continued need for I&I mitigation efforts, so again, reaffirmed the approach, and developed a number of recommendations to the council to develop tools that could be made available to communities to use in their public outreach and education efforts, and to advocate, for the council to advocate, for a dedicated and reliable funding source for communities, especially in the area of private property mitigation. This chart here just gives a brief, very high-level summary of the financial assistance programs that were made available to local communities between 2004 and 2020. Local communities have invested over $170 million, primarily in the public infrastructure improvements. Of that $170 million, $24.2 million were funded through the bond grant, I&I grants. And then during that same time, the council has also invested over $100 million in I&I mitigation efforts on the regional system. So pipelining, manhole rehabilitation, mitigating areas of flooding to alleviate ponding over pipes, and projects such as that. And then in 2013, we had a one-time funding source for private property I&I that came from the Clean Water Legacy. ES Finance administered that program, but the key takeaway here is out of the $170 million of work that's been done to date, the vast majority has been on the public side. So the comment, one of the recommendations, as I indicated a little bit earlier, the 2016 task force was in acknowledgement of the unreliable funding sources for private property assistance. And so the recommendation was that the council seek statutory authority to allow the Metropolitan Council to provide financial assistance through communities to assist private property owners with I&I mitigation activities using revenues generated by wastewater fees. In 1994, the city of Duluth advocated for a bill that was signed into law that allowed cities to establish I&I prevention programs and make loans and grants available to property owners using internal funding sources. The council sponsored an initiative to include under the definition of city, to include township or any political subdivision of the state with statutory authority ownership of operational responsibilities. The first bill with this language was first introduced during the 2021 legislative session. It did not pass, however, during this last legislation, it did pass, and it was signed by Governor Walz in April of this year. So I think it's important to note that the change in the law not only allows the council to offer pass-through private property I&A grants, but also allows other agencies that are subdivisions of the state the same authority. A few of these sanitary sewer service districts include Western Lake Superior, Alexandria, and Moose Lake Whittemere sanitary sewer districts. So the law change didn't just benefit the council, it benefited other service providers. So acknowledging the statute change and in follow-up with the 2016 recommendation, staff proposes that the private property I&A grant program guidelines for these grants be developed by a task force consistent with our historic approach for customer representatives for the council's regional I&I program. It's envisioned that members of the task forces will include a mix of local staff areas and a mix of local staff representing different areas of responsibilities and background experiences. Also, we propose to have a good mix of communities based on size, type of community, the percentage of housing stock age within that community, geographic location, and their susceptibility to I&I. And as with previous task forces, we also are proposing that metro cities be invited to participate in the task force. So some of the milestones for the schedule, we do plan to have the chair recommend a membership to the task force. We have been in contact with a number of communities, St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Anthony. I believe the city of Chanhassen has agreed to serve on that. We are still seeking, in addition to those four, probably another 9 to 11 representatives. Past task force has usually been in that 15 to 17 membership range. With the addition of metro cities, and historically the task force has usually been chaired by someone on the Environment Committee, so that might be a request coming up here in the future. Then after the chair recommends membership, we plan to have our first meeting of the task force in November, wrapping up meetings with the task force in April of 2023, then begin the development of the program in June of next year, finalizing with a public hearing in September, with the first grant applications being accepted in January of 2024. And with that, we can answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Councilmember Bento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, Kyle, but I just want to applaud the efforts to include, to expand the participation. I have 2 townships in District 11, and I was practically knocked over with a feather a few weeks ago when I met with their Utilities Commission and learned that they only get $12, or most recently only got $12 in LGA, and that they are not able to participate in all grant programs with a variety of agencies. So I have a lot to learn about what it's like to be a township, but I think including them is just terrific, and I'm really pleased that the council has helped play a role in this.
That was the grand total of local government aid that they received was $12. Can't even
With a
fund
population of
donuts.
over 10,000 people.
Oh, my goodness.
They also don't receive franchise, the franchise or the gas tax.
Franchise fees or
right.
anything like that, yeah. Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you, Chair. I just was wondering, like, what methods are using to recruit people for the grant task force? Is it like through the planning department, or do you send out notes, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Sterner, we reviewed the list of past participation. We also, we've basically reached out verbally. So far, we haven't really gone out with any kind of broad solicitation for membership. Contacting really the, Minneapolis and St. Paul being the two largest contributors, of wastewater flow in the system. And then also, again, contacting a couple of communities like St. Anthony specifically that actually expressed an interest to serving on the task force when they heard about the efforts back in 2021. So wanted to make sure that we at least offered them the opportunity to serve on the task force.
Councilmember Wolf.
Number one, I volunteer. Number two, we might want to ask West St. Paul to be involved since they have significant experience with private I&I.
They're on my list.
And just to be clear, the volunteer was to chair the task force. Fantastic. Without objection.
I've done it before.
I know you have. You did the 2016 task force.
Not that one. I did the one before that.
Okay. I think that is a fine idea. Councilmember Fredson.
Thanks, Chair. So you referenced some communities that are outside of the metro that have dealt with this challenge, and I'm just curious to know to what extent this task force will be working with representatives of those communities. And I asked that question because my observation is this is always a legislative priority. Obviously needs more resources, especially if you get to the point where you're actually paying for the private side of the work. And I think that in the end, that's probably what's gonna have to happen in order for the replacement to occur. But in order to get the political will to pass the legislation and more funding, it's really useful to have support outside of the metro. So that's the background on the question.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Fredson, that's the task force will help guide the council in the guidelines. One of the considerations might be the fact that these funds will be coming from a portion of revenues collected through our MWC. So therefore, the availability for the funds might be restricted to those communities that are contributing to that funding source, the users, the 111 technically 112 communities that are contributing to the system.
And is that part of the task force? It's to come up with where the funding comes from, whether it's the MWC or state appropriation or something else?
Mr. Chair. Yeah, the source of the funding we've already have kind of earmarked as being the PAYGO. That again was one of the common questions that came up during the testimony up at the Capitol this last legislative session. They wanted to be assured that this program would not result in any rate increases. So the PAYGO is a dedicated, reliable, set-aside fund that we feel we can utilize to fund the program. The amount of the annual request will be something that will be talked about at the task force. It is $11 million that is also used to support the capital program and other projects and activities all related to capital program. But yeah, the funding level will be something, will be part of the discussion.
Great. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back before you guys were here, they had a discussion on what was the impact of all of this maintenance that we had been doing on the system. And I can't remember the exact amounts, but it was somewhere in the vicinity of $125 million of maintenance had saved $1 billion in costs for expanding interceptors and plants to deal with water that didn't need to be in the system. So when you make those investments, you get a really great return on the investment. But we've been restricted up to now on being able to get at that last piece of all of those little pipes that are having the rotor-rooter man come and drill them through, and there's pretty much no pipe left, and you need to replace it, kind of a thing. So we have the opportunity to have a pretty good return on investment on those pipes as well.
So that's $1 billion that we're not passing on to small businesses and homeowners
Yes.
all across the metropolitan area. I'm sold. Other questions, comments? It's an important task. Thank you, Councilmember Wolf, for volunteering to co-chair. Really appreciate that. And we do not need a motion, so thank you very much. We look forward to hearing more.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the general manager's report.
Just today, I would, given the items that we just heard presented, the I want to emphasize that that was the region looking at this on more of a whole and the ultimate outcome, so that we make a decision that everybody benefits from versus, that's your problem. We don't care what it costs to fix it, just fix it. And that is so much our recurring theme for water in this region and trying to live our vision of clean water for future generations. So the fact that we had Chair Lindstrom and Councilmember Sterner, the last meeting that we would have met, that we didn't have, you were at the One Water, U.S. Water Alliance Summit, and I understand the delegation did some good work together and are going to help us with a regional development framework this next round to bring that concept even more to life for us. So I'm excited to have the partnership we already have, but the fact that we're growing in our understanding of how to achieve One Water.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think this summit highlighted for me how historically we've thought about water in these different silos. You have groundwater and surface water and drinking water and stormwater and wastewater. And water has no idea what water is. No, like water doesn't know if it's groundwater. Water doesn't know if it's going to be turned into Gatorade in 5 minutes or if it's wastewater. Water is water, but we have this alphabet soup of agencies out there, Bowser and MPCA and DNR and us and all the watershed districts, and we're all in these silos, and we all work together already, certainly. But this One Water Summit really highlighted the need to work together and the need to work more inclusively with the communities that we serve, and not leave anybody behind. There was a real strong emphasis on environmental justice, thinking about Flint, Michigan, thinking about Jackson, Mississippi, thinking about New Orleans and who was impacted by flooding, right on down the line. And so it was really, as I said, refreshing to use the water theme, and it was reinvigorating, and I think Councilmember Sterner probably felt the same. And it was great that we had a whole delegation of people that were there. We probably had, I don't know the exact number, but 8, 9, 10 of us from community development and from our folks that were all kind of thinking about, okay, well, we're just approaching this next round of regional work, regional development work, and how do we incorporate what we're hearing into this 2050 planning? I don't know, Councilmember Sterner, anything you'd like to add?
Well, just I'd say it was really a good collaborative thing, and it was very impressive seeing all the different people around the country. Like one of the people who was in a delegate worked with one of the nonprofits. She said when she was in the water biz like 8 or 9 years ago, she'd count people in the room, and there was one woman for every 9 men in the room, And it was pretty much 50-50 when we were there at the convention, and a lot of diversity of the people. And there were other people from Minnesota looking at, the environmental justice piece and things. So it looks like really collaborative. And I had a good connection with the water bar. They had a couple of artists that work with the water bar, and they were there kind of promoting the water bar around the country. So they had water from Little Rock, and we had 3 places from Minnesota, as well as New Orleans water, and it was kind of great doing that. But one of the artists was working with carp, and so the Clean Water Council, we're trying to figure out what do you do with carp, because it's an invasive species, and try to make it a thing. But she was making purses and belts on that, so I was kind of creating something we could do, because I know like have some people that struggle with crime or addictions, but what they do for their one is fishing, and then they said, "Well, you guys don't want to create carp?" Yeah, I don't want to catch that carp, but give them downtime, and she's like needs to get the source, and we're trying to figure it out. But it would be a good industry to go, and we could teach new artists coming up too. So I'm kind of creating this, but the policy committee is looking for maybe a presentation next month. So we'll see where that goes. But I thought that was good when she showed me her sample, what she made out of carp, and she also does what's the other plant? Let me think. I'm missing out. Buckthorn. So she makes stuff out of buckthorn too. So, so it's pretty impressive. So,
Probably not buckthorn belts.
well, she might. She cuts it pretty thin in that. It might be. Yeah, let's see. But, yeah, maybe a little
Belts.
thicker,
You
so.
learn something new every day.
Yeah, so it was really, I learned a lot, and a lot of good connection with people around the country too that were working, like with schools. There were some schools in Texas that are one water schools where they show the kids all the process where the water goes, or the pipes different colors and that, and there's like 9 of them in Texas, and I thought, well, usually we're a leader there. So I could see that being with our education system, trying to get our building started with the water right from early age. So.
Very good.
So that's it. We're up to the task, and we're happy to have you as partners.
Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one administrative thing. I would ask that council members, if you know ahead of time that you're not going to be at the meeting, to let staff know, so that we don't scramble like we did last Tuesday, trying to figure out if we had a quorum or not. Thank you.
Excellent point. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.